A 40-year-old failed asylum seeker, Anicet Mayela, who once protested against outside a detention centre holding a sign that read, "Migrants are not criminals," could now face life in jail for raping a 15-year-old. Mayela was able to stay in Britain after a failed asylum bid as his deportation was blocked by a do-gooder cabin crew who prevented his repatriation flight from taking off. Brilliant. I'm now joined by international border control expert Henry Bolton, and still with me is barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. Welcome back, Andrew and Henry. Nice to see you. You probably remember this case, as do I, and there was a big hoo-ha about it because I think even the passengers on the plane was telling the cabin crew and everybody else, "Oh, leave him alone, take him off the plane." You know, this whole wasn't just a cabin crew of do-gooders; it was an entire plane load.
It was.
Meanwhile, this guy, who it turns out is actually a criminal, has now been done for being a criminal.
Yeah, funny old thing. Yeah, it was an Air France plane, so we should get that straight. Because for me, I've been saying for a while that, you know, with regards to the Rwanda plan, which is a red herring, it's not going to deter anything, but it's the government's plan and they want to go ahead with it, and they're having all sorts of problems with it, as we all know. But one of the problems that they've got is that they have so far not identified any airline that is prepared to fly people to Rwanda.
Right.
And therefore the Ministry of Defence is on standby. This is the same Ministry of Defence that's on standby to deal with things in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, you know, and wherever else. Its priority is not to be flying asylum seekers around the world. But I have been saying for a long time that the government needs to build up the immigration service to such an extent that it's got its own people to escort, because at the moment it's outsourced. In fact, I think they've just recently issued a contract to a company to provide escorts. So these people are civilians. They have no powers of arrest. They have whatever quality of training that they have and so on. And if you are going to put asylum seekers who may well decide to kick off, particularly if there's previous for a flight being cancelled or them being taken off the flight if they do kick off on the flight. If you're going to put such people on a civilian aircraft with cabin crew who have no training in dealing with such a situation, you know, in that sort of context, with passengers who might be frightened and worried about it because they're civilians as well, it's, you know, why catch them up in this? The government needs to put the correct resources behind the plan that it wants to implement. It has failed singularly to do that.
So my understanding
and that's my problem.
My understanding, well, there are two issues on this. My understanding is they do have a backup plan if some of the airlines don't take it. But it's the more important issue...
They say they have.
Well, we're going to
what is it, though?
Well, exactly. We need to... They say they've got other planes which they make something happen. But the most important thing is, which is the main sort of thrust of this story, is this guy is a criminal. So the question is, and he's admitted to raping this 15-year-old girl. The question is, when did that occur?
Did it not happen after he was taken off the plane?
I think that's
my
the reality.
understanding is that he hadn't committed the rape before he was being deported for other reasons.
It did, but this is also nigh on 20 years ago. And we're still, this case is still, I mean, OK, but he was supposed to have been deported, then he wasn't deported because of this incident. And that whole scenario of this chap being allowed to remain in the UK, despite all of that, has continued until the point that he commits a rape.
We know from a story that came out, I think, a couple of weeks ago from the Home Office itself, that hardly anybody gets deported, even if they actually are ordered to be deported. Mostly they remain in the country. Mostly they disappear. Nobody really knows where they are. We've already lost, I think, this year 6,000 asylum seekers. Nobody knows where they've gone. But equally, the ones who are apparently supposed to be deported, apart from the ones that went to Albania, they just don't leave.
No, you're absolutely right, Mike. And what we need is that clarity, and we need people to actually enforce the rules. If people are criminals, and it's fine this guy holding up a sign saying migrants are not criminals, well, he is a criminal.
Well,
and he's admitted now. We need to work on the basis.
This is the whole thing about people's argument with regards to the ECHR, pulling out of the ECHR, because it removes one of the layers that prevents these deportations taking place. But time and time again, I go back to the point that Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can make these laws. The government can make these decisions to make these things happen. It is a matter of courage and political courage and the determination, the will to do it.
So what should the law be then?
Singularly,
what should the rule be?
Well, the rule...
Yes, in terms of, if you say you're going to get certainty...
Excuse me, I'm asking the
question. I'm sorry.
I mean, there's some reversal of roles going on. But anyway, it's a good question, so I'll carry on. You carry on.
I mean, you know, you've got umpteen rules. But, I mean, if a foreign national commits a crime that is imprisonable for 6 months or more, at the moment I think it's 12 months,
Yes.
then I would want to see them deported. But you have to have the operational
But you then have to
resources in
deport them,
place.
though.
Yeah, you have to do it.
But to do that, you have to have the operational resources in place. You have to have the political will to drive through the bureaucracy, the naysayers, the activists.
Right. Yes.
And if the law does not allow you to do it, which actually I believe that it does, then you've got to change the law.
Yeah.
If you are a government, a party that has the majority in Parliament, you know, you can drive that through.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the
if
law
you
can
don't
say
do it,
anything. The same way as you can
does.
declare a country safe, even if it's not,
If we
just by
look
changing
at
the law.
the Rwanda bill at the moment, we heard the other day that now we've got Costa Rica,
Yes.
Botswana,
Yes.
Yeah.
Ivory Coast,
Yes.
and Armenia
Yes.
being talked. With the negotiations going on regarding about, sending asylum seekers there as well as Rwanda. Fine, we're passing a Rwanda safety bill,
Yeah.
and as I said at the time, that's a one-off piece of legislation. It is utterly flawed because it is not part of a comprehensive plan.
Yes.
You work out your comprehensive plan. Does it include Armenia? Does it include all these other countries? You draft the law and put it in front of Parliament accordingly.
Yes.
Absolutely.
At the moment,
They
it's
don't
just,
seem to be very good at this, which is basically their
Mike,
job.
they're appalling.
Right.
They
And
are
there's
utterly
hundreds
appalling.
and hundreds of people at their disposal in the Home Office who could frame this
Yes.
particular law if they wanted to.
And
frame
it's not that difficult.
You know,
But
it's
could
not
they?
that difficult.
But I asked the question, could they? Because I'm honestly not sure, A, that they want to,
Yes.
B, that they do have the knowledge and the experience to do so.
Right.
And the other point
But
as
also,
well,
if they don't
yeah.
have the planes, shouldn't
Yeah.
we not have the ability? But I'll remind you of something else that happened. When
Yes.
there was a suggestion we should send them to Ascension Island.
Yes.
And the RAF actually said, we're not going to do that.
Right.
Well,
They
the
said
RAF,
the
like I
RAF
say-
refused to do it.
As I say, the
excuse
RAF
me.
has got other commitments.
Well, yeah, they
You
may
know,
have commitments, but it was almost like they didn't want to do it. It wasn't
Yeah.
so much that we've got too many commitments. It was
But if this-
as a sort of a matter of policy.
We've got
they
so
wouldn't
many of
do
these
it.
people, it's worth buying the aircraft
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
getting the staff to crew them.
Mike's
But-
absolutely right, though. You have to have a policy which is going to be enforced. It's not,
Yeah,
otherwise, it's just
exactly.
the letter of the law needs to be enforced. And the other point, and Mike made the point brilliantly last week, is that we discovered that during the coronation, these various countries
Yeah.
being tapped up over the vol of votes, weren't there to say, well,
Amazing.
will you take a few for
Well,
us?
would you mind? Yeah, absolutely right. And meanwhile, the Rwanda bill's been delayed again.
Yes.
We were told it might actually
Ping pong.
become a bill by Friday, and that's not now going to happen because the Lords have put the amendments back in, which the Commons took out.
And they say they say the first will be by spring, but they don't say
think
which year.
There are two things I'd like to say. But one is that this failure,
Yes.
as this case actually demonstrates or illustrates, is putting the British public at risk.
Yes.
Which is a massive government failure of the first order. The second thing is that the government, there was a referendum, the Brexit referendum,
Yeah.
in which...
I've heard of that.
So have I. In which most people voted, or a lot of people voted, because they wanted immigration under control. And it has exploded since. Not because of Brexit, but because of the poor governance of this by the British government and Parliament. And then in 2019, there was a very clear majority for the Conservative Party on the back of a promise to reduce immigration.
Yeah.
The British public has spoken democratically as to what their will is. Okay. Now, democracy is a protection if you listen to it. If politicians ignore the democratic will as expressed in the ballot, then democracy does not work as an insurance policy any longer. And then we see this sort of thing happening. The British public put at risk. You see sort of localised problems that you can't control anymore because you've sort of kind of lost track of where you are democratically. So there are a whole raft of problems here. There is no national strategy. And it goes back to the point, and I think earlier you discussed Mike Menzies and...
Well, I was going to
and
say,
we've
they're all too busy getting held hostage.
Well, they're getting held hostage.
And looking for partners on Grindr.
These people, surely, we, the British public, should be demanding that we've got people who have experienced enough, have the ability, have the strategic grasp and everything to be effective legislators for the nation and to be leaders.
Yes.
Because at the moment, we don't have any of that.
Well, have a look at this story.
And I'm not being party political there.